guys, I'm back. This week I wanted to put out a video that's not really a how-to, but it's more of a review. One of the products I bought for the 240. This happens to be the Chase Bay's power steering kit. I have bought Chase Bay's stuff in the past, and it's been pretty good quality. I know if you look them up, there's mixed reviews on them. So far, I've been pleased. The car I installed this set on is a Koki S14 with S13 SR swap. As you can see from the picture, it's pretty standard as far as SR swap goes with top mount turbo. Really, the only thing stock in the engine bay is windshield washer bottle, the power steering, um, and the brake master reservoir. So I figured instead of just replacing with factory stuff once it started leaking, I might as well just upgrade and match the rest. So when the power steering first started leaking, it kind of went unnoticed because it was collecting in the pan right here. And if you know anything about power steering fluid, is it's really rough on plastics and rubbers that are not designed for it. It's hydraulic fluid, so it actually causes the plastic to kind of stretch. So right in the middle point here, it would actually be the lowest point in the car, and it would start dragging, going up the driveway and whatnot. So the part that was leaking was just a factory return hose, and it's a 25-year-old hose, and I'm surprised it lasted that long without leaking that much, especially with all the heat and whatnot from the turbo right there. The install overall really wasn't that bad. You start off by removing the splash tray to access everything in front of the engine underneath. Then move over to the rack. This is the best place to drain it from. There's going to be the two fittings, the high pressure and the return. Um, Pull off the hoses and let the system drain. That way you're not trying to drain it from the reservoir and it's running down the side of the car. Put a little pan down there. Chase Bays does provide the fittings to go into this rack, so you're going to be unscrewing those as well. Disassembling everything from the top of the engine is going to be different per vehicle. Just totally depends on if you have like a stock mount turbo setup, top mount like what you see here. If you have the factory intake box, which 99% are not going to because it's probably a swap and you're going to have some kind of cone filter. But there's plenty of room to work with. If you have original hoses like mine, they're going to probably be pretty stiff and crunchy, which is the reason why they were leaking in the first place. I think the only special tool I used during this process was this Torx bit. And if I remember right, this kind of differs per power steering pump you have. So some of the power steering pumps might have an Allen, some might have a Torx bit, and I believe some might just have a regular hex head. So that's something to keep in mind. One of my main reasons for buying the Chase Bays kit was so I wouldn't have to do the research and track down all the different fittings that fit the power steering properly in the rack. Um, Anybody can make AN lines, but I just didn't want to have to spend the time to track down all these different parts. You can see here the 10 AN fitting bolts nicely to the power steering pump. This is everything that gets removed off the car from the factory system. One thing I did not realize when I purchased this was that you'd be removing the factory power steering cooler as well, which is really just a loop of aluminum. It's that aluminum hose that actually bolts to the cross member, goes right behind the oil pan. I'm going to be installing a like a 10-row power steering cooler here in the near future, um, which is fine. That was kind of in the plans down the road. I just didn't realize we're going to be pulling all this off as well. That was probably the most difficult part of the job, was to pull the factory power steering cooler off, just because it's a hard bent line. And I don't know if it's because I have the Gretty pan, but it's kind of tight to finagle out of there. You use your factory pressure banjo bolt here. One thing to note, there is a extension on the factory power steering pump that's like a little neck that sticks off. There is one regular banjo bolt, and then there's this pressure bolt that is part of it. I've seen some people remove the pressure bolt altogether, which your power steering is not going to properly operate. I've also seen somebody keep the extension neck on the power steering pump which can work. It'll work just fine. It all depends on your setup. I have a custom top mount here. It's not a kit, and this fit my setup nicely. If I would have used the extension, I would have been hitting the intercooler pipe. I routed this hot pipe from the turbo different than a lot of top mounts. This one is routed just above the frame rail and goes in through the side, then down behind the bumper. With the typical top mounts, people will run it 90 degrees and then right behind the headlight and then straight down through that hole right there. I didn't want to do that, just to save some space there. We have the old school HIDs, catch can. Power steering return hose fits just under this hot pipe, so I just kind of worked out nicely. Every setup's going to be different, especially if you have a stock mount. I believe Chase Bays takes this into consideration. Overall, fit and finish of the kit is actually really well. Everything looks good. Lines felt like they were really well made, but full disclosure, I think it was less than 10 miles and I had the lines leaking. Now, this could be they could have just got a bad batch in, some bad crimps or something, but the high pressure hose at the power steering pump was starting to leak at the crimp, and the return hose was also leaking. One thing I will give Chase Bays was I contacted them. I provided the requested pictures. They stood behind their product, and within 2 days, I had new lines at the house. So they shipped them out really quickly. So that is one thing to consider. I have heard of other people having the same issue, so maybe they just got a bad batch of hoses. I'm not sure. I'll see how long these ones last, but that's really not the end of the world because I can make my own hoses, and then I know they're not going to leak. Like I said before, I mainly bought this kit just to get all the oddball fittings for the rack and for the power steering pump. Really, the only issues I have is with the leaky lines, and I'm also getting a whiny power steering pump, which, if you read up, seems to be a typical complaint. The system is fully bled, so I'm wondering if it has something to do with the design of the power steering reservoir. Maybe it has something to do with the lack of cooler. I'll find out soon enough. I'm going to be building my own cooler setup. I thought about buying the Chase Bays power steering cooler, but I'm going to be mounting it a little bit different, and I'd rather make my own lines to be routed differently than they route their kit, especially because my intercooler pipe is routed differently. So I'm going to have to kind of make my own custom length lines, and I can just get a oil cooler. All that stuff is, I believe it's 6AN. Everything should match up. Like I said, my main purpose was to get the fittings for this. I definitely would recommend other Chase Bays products on this car. I believe I have the Willwood Clutch Master kit for this. They just make a lot of little items here and there. I was kind of browsing a few things for the FD. But I'll see how these new power steering lines hold up. If they start leaking again, then I would probably steer away from the kit and make your own if you can track down the fittings. But I mean, if they don't leak and it was just a fluke, then I definitely would recommend the kit. I've got a couple more videos coming up similar to this, some parts I installed on the 240. I also just completed my rat's nest and fuel restoration on the FD, so that video should be coming down the pipe pretty soon. If you like this, please share, subscribe, comment in the chat, see what I can do better. I'm new to this. Let me know maybe some content you want to see. We'll see you in the next video.